So within our already decadent and swanky F1 suite, we built a private speakeasy room in the back that's an omakase experience. So 1 minute you're standing on a balcony watching the 20 best drivers in the world, and then you can hang out and have a cocktail, and then you're sitting with some of the best chefs in the world eating an incredible experience. It's a 25, 30-minute experience. We've experimented with it on a lighter level, but this year we went all in, and then the hidden room and the experience. You walk in and it's a completely different setup than the suite. It feels like you walked into a small restaurant in Japan.
But just watching what his team does, top to bottom, no matter what the event is, art and cars and all of the, it's just extraordinary what they do. And I've never seen anybody walk out of one of these events going, that wasn't very good. Everybody walks out going, wow, was that incredible.
That's great.
And that's what that's what they're all about.
We'll have Aston Martins on site. We'll have a fleet of Vantages. We have some DBXs. Our services range a broad spectrum. So we'll be using DBXs to do airport pickups and drop-offs and shuttle people around the city, and we're using some DBXs to get to and from the stadium today. And if you're a corporation or a group and you want to host an event here, we'll be able to execute those events in these brand new Vantages. I don't know if you've been in one yet, but the growl of the V8 sound and the turbos, and they're just stunning vehicles. So we're really proud to announce that, and we'll see where this takes us in the future.
So that explains, I guess, Alonso's suit for the entry today.
Every detail matters, Greg. I love that guys like you get recognized.
It all comes together, exactly.
We also have our new 200-foot concrete irrigated skid pad. And I don't know what's more fun than a wet skid pad and a twin turbo rear wheel drive V8. But if you can find something, let me know.
Yeah, so far.
It's time to make the donuts.
Tough to top, yeah, exactly.
I'm Aaron Weiss, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
I'm Greg Kramer, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
Damn, he's good.
He is good.
It's almost like he's a professional.
Exactly. Aaron, this is such a big weekend for you, and first of all, thanks for having us here at Cars and Culture. And this is the epicenter of car culture this weekend. Let's talk a little bit about what you're doing this year. We'll get to some of the major news later. But just what Miami means to you. And when I had you on the program earlier this year, we talked a lot about just what Formula One, the buzz that it brings to the area, and how you try to capitalize on that, what it truly means for the club as a whole.
I think you can feel that energy today. I think everybody in the city could feel that energy. I know I felt that energy. I did notice coming down the highway to work this morning that the general pace on the highway was much faster.
It's a little faster, right?
Everybody feels that Formula One energy, particularly in the express lane of 75. But it truly has become our Super Bowl weekend. It's become our Super Bowl weekend here. It's just really a pinnacle of everything that we do, and I think it's a culmination not just of the motorsport and the competition side, but there's such a degree of show and pomp and circumstance, and then the competitive nature of it. And I mean, the level of discussion has elevated between, is it going to be Lando, is it going to be Oscar, and the fact that Max doesn't seem to be in the conversation. The fact that the general fan in Miami is so educated on what's going on in Formula One endlessly impresses me.
Yeah, it's true. It's building, isn't it, through the years? Now
Sure.
that you're now that we're a few years into this, there's an establishment. I think I read this morning that either Toto Wolff had said or Stefano Domenicali had said that there's just a different energy to what's occurring in Miami than at most places around the world. Do you concur here in your backyard?
I'm so glad to hear that from Toto as a guy who goes to all the races. Maybe my view is probably a little bit more myopic than him. I've attended several races across the world, but I'm always here for this one. I can attest to the vibe and energy and the amp going up in the city, but Toto saying that's quite interesting.
What does it mean to your members?
Selfishly, I think it's kind of the end of our season. It's like it's a little bittersweet. We have such a fabulous season, and not that the club closes, but the usage definitely drops off, and this seems to be the end, and we end on the highest note. As we said, it's our Super Bowl weekend. So I think our members hopefully feel a little bit of bittersweet. It's the end of our social season. It's the biggest event we run. I think the competition is great itself, and certainly what we do at the stadium and the activation is a high level, but I feel a little bittersweet with this one.
Yeah, understood. Greg, you've been a part of this now for a couple of years as well. I guess, what does it all mean to you, to some extent, from not only a fan perspective, but from a club perspective, from an energy level? Give us your read on it.
Well, as Aaron was talking, the thing that struck me was, you think back to the 60s, they used to say the Grand Prix circus is coming. And, you think back in the early years when the circus came to town, a real circus, it was a huge event. And I really think that sort of has carried through. I was at Mosport a few years ago and was there for a test day, was watching as the paddock was being set up. And one of the people next to me said, I love it when the circus sets up. And that's what this is, only on a much higher scale, right? And the amount of revenue it brings to the area is massive, but the energy of a Formula One weekend, it's cool. The circus is setting up, and it's going to be a massive show, and that's really kind of the feel.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great.
Yeah. You've got such an interesting perspective, Greg, having spent a number of years in and around tracks and circuits, and maybe give us your perspective on how Miami has changed, and maybe how the United States has changed generally from an F1 perspective.
Well, back when Watkins Glen, they had the race. It was an incredibly popular event, but it was obviously in an area back then, especially, that was really short on hotel rooms and all of that.
All the infrastructure.
Like everything, it's not much there, even today.
And that was a huge circus they came in. How many years did they run there? It was like 10 years?
10 at least, yeah. And it was great, but it just didn't, there were really devout fans, but there were also a lot of people that came out just for the party, right? And, then Formula One sort of eased a little bit in popularity, and then Drive to Survive started on Netflix. And it happened during the pandemic, when people couldn't go out, couldn't do anything, and they'd be looking for something to watch, and they'd click on Drive to Survive. And here you're getting these inside stories on these pilots, really, that are just wielding these incredibly fast cars in these really tight, tough circuits, and what they dealt with, what they go through, and the popularity blew up.
The curtain was unveiled, really, is what it is. You could look behind the curtain. Interesting thing for me is that through the years, through the last number of years now, what we've really seen is the demographic has changed around this sport. I mean, I've talked on this program before. I was 10 years old, streets of Detroit, 1981 or so, hanging onto a fence with a $5 ticket. Those who were around me in Detroit, the other fans, right, were...
Buy a $5 soda now.
Right, right. But they were all South Americans or Europeans because it was affordable to go to Detroit to see a Formula One race. But there weren't Americans around us. I mean, there were some curious Americans, but there was not an energy around a 22-year-old or a college-age female fan who wanted to see Lando up close and personal. I mean, that's the part that
it could have been very likely that those Americans were actually Canadians.
Well,
because they were in Detroit. They've always been huge.
No, that's exactly who they were.
Part of what Drive to Survive did was it removed the helmet.
Yeah.
I mean, it gave us that personal touch to the drivers. If you were a hardcore fan, you saw it because you watched the race, you watched the you watched the interviews. If you were a casual fan, you watched an ESPN highlight, you never saw the driver out of the helmet. Yeah. So I think the removal of the helmet, the introduction of the drama, is what really drove that perfect storm. But I think you guys cued on to something else that's interesting, and I think maybe Formula One is riding a little bit of the wave that we're riding. When we last spoke, we talked about what made our country club, Motorsport Country Club, unique compared to the others, and it's proximity to the city. When you talk about Watkins Glen, I remember what it took to drive to Watkins Glen. So the partiers went, the hardcore went. And I think you still have a little bit of that with more of the traditional tracks on these racetracks all around the world. But here in Miami, we have, much like we have at the club, a lot of casual social attendees. And now being that it's year 4, I think they've become fans. We did have people who came to year 1 who didn't watch Netflix, who were just here because it was the coolest thing in town this weekend.
Right.
But now they kind of got hooked, and the Lando win last year, the storylines. Yeah. That Lando win last year is one of those storylines, and I think it's also so easy, the proximity to get to the Hard Rock Stadium from anywhere downtown is just so easy compared to getting to a Watkins Glen or where I've not been. It's on my bucket list. What I've heard about getting to Silverstone, I've heard is an absolute
nightmare
challenge.
And the interesting thing too is that when you're driving a 95 and you get within 3 weeks of this event, you see the track being built, and you drive by it, and I think, people drive by and go, wow, what's going on there? And that's generated interest. But getting back to what you're saying, I announced, I think it was the first 4 Formula One races at COTA, right, for the track. And the first year it was blown out.
Yeah.
In terms of, every year after that, it just started to drop and drop and drop. And because it was the hardcore people, you had people from around the world came and everything, but then that started to ease. And again, I keep getting back to Drive to Survive and COVID, when people had nothing else to do. And ever since that, that's why now we're the only country that have 3 Formula One events.
And 5 in North America.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And when you talk about COTA and the relationship to the Netflix launch of the series, COTA was almost dead, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, COTA, when it rained and flooded the one year.
I announced that one. It was
nuts. And they had written Austin off prior to COVID, prior to the Netflix series being announced. And to see the resurgence now and the record crowds, and not just there, but here, and also in, obviously, Las Vegas and the property that's been developed there. It's a resurgence that the sport hasn't seen since the 60s, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps even eclipsing all of that. I was at the F1 Academy premiere last night, and to see those under 25 years old, female, in the crowd when they open it up to everybody, anybody can go and watch if you bought a ticket. The screaming, the adulation, the appreciation for Susie Wolf from the crowd.
Yep.
She's a rock star in her own way.
Yeah. A true passion.
A true passion around all of it. Yeah. So let's talk about a few other things, Aaron, related to this weekend. The LVMH pop-up Thursday and Friday here. What does that mean? LVMH, obviously, with its lead support now of the series, what does that mean to the club?
I think it one drives the other, right? So first, there's this growing storm of interest in the race. Then there's all these attendees at the race. Then there's a resurgence of the sport in general, and then luxury brands want to be involved in that. And Miami's the ideal place. So with LVMH as now a series sponsor for all of Formula One. They're going to increase their activations in certain locations, and I think Miami was one of their key targets. So we've had a connection with them back and forth, in addition to just being fans and customers, having an idea and operating in the same luxury space. I mean, our customers are their customers and vice versa. So when they approached us looking for a place to do more activations and more unique things, it was an absolute no-brainer for us. Our clients are their clients, and we're interested in the products. And as you know, we host some incredible activations here at the club. One of the things that separates, I think, our venue that we've been building, not for 3 weeks, I think 3 months we've been building that venue over there. But one of the things that separates us is the convenience. As I mentioned in our last podcast when we talked about the club, one of the things we try and do is remove those friction points for our members. And ingress and egress parking at the stadium is one of those friction points. So a key element of our suite there is the VIP shuttle pickup drop-off. All the members come here to the club first. That means that we have this additional activation space that's great, but we're always looking for new ways to entertain our guests. So the LVMH pop-up is absolutely incredible. They did a great job in there. It's got a great blend of, we did this pop-up inside what's day-to-day a car storage bay.
Right.
I love the fact that LVMH sees the cars as sculpture and art. I had some toolboxes left in there. If you're lucky enough to be the owner of a McLaren Senna GTR, it comes with a giant tool case. and I walked in yesterday while they were doing the setup, and I noticed these tool cases in the corner, and I said, "Oh man, I'm so sorry these are here. Do you want us to move the tool cases?" And they said, "No, I'm glad you asked. In fact, we want to use them as part of the display." The fact that they've embraced motorsport at that level is incredible. So the LVMH pop-up, I think, is just a unique offering for our members. It's a great partner, and the brands they bought are terrific. I mean, they brought some fabulous wristwatches. They brought some great champagne. There's some terrific art. Who could complain about any of that? It's very Miami. It's very Formula One.
It is very Miami. Yeah. And the speakeasy experience, the hidden entrance via Alonso's racing suit. Tell me a little bit about that. What have you tried to do there?
We love delighting. We love delighting our members. We love surprising our members. I think one of the things that we enjoy doing is create these unbelievable juxtapositions. So you can meet expectations, but the best is to create experiences that had no expectations. So within our already decadent and swanky F1 suite, We built a private speakeasy room in the back that's an omakase experience. So 1 minute you're standing on a balcony watching the 20 best drivers in the world, and then you can hang out and have a cocktail, and then you're sitting with some of the best chefs in the world eating a incredible experience. It's a 25, 30-minute experience. We've experimented with it on a lighter level, but this year we went all in, and then the hidden room and the experience. So you walk in and it's a completely different setup than the suite. It feels like you walked into a small restaurant in Japan.
And you already have the pool.
We have the pool there. And we have I don't know if you're aware of this, but our Concours Cup Season 1 champion, Juan Pablo Martinez, is now competing in the Porsche Series.
Oh, yeah.
It's a support race.
Yeah.
And I got a commitment from Juan Pablo that if he wins the race, he's jumping in the pool.
There we go.
Perfect.
Of which we already have a history of. In year 2, our member Moise Uretsky won the Porsche race and jumped in the pool. So I'd like to continue that tradition.
Well, there's 2 coaches that work here that are also in that series. Matthias Weiss, Liest,
I think
and Yves.
3 is, and Angel Benitez is in there as well.
That's right. Yes, he is.
So 3 of our coaches
so-
will be competing in that series.
So how did you come up with that idea?
Which one?
The speakeasy.
The speakeasy idea was.
I mean, it's just you sitting and going, you know what? How can we possibly take this to the next level?
One of the ways to keep going to the next level is to hire great people and give them the runway.
Yeah.
That one was not my idea. That was the brainchild of a combination of our food and beverage team, our event design team, our event execution team, both our partners at Creative Lab. We work with an incredible company, Melissa Babile from Creative Labs. She executes that suite for us. It always has a theme. You know you're in the Concours Club. So when our F&B team says we want to do something incredible, we want to have an omakase experience, then our in-house event team figures out the logistics, and then we're going to have to do it. And then we hand it to her, and she escalates it to even the next level with the build-out. It's quite a complicated build-out. When you walk in there, you'll see it all kind of fits together, but the complexity of putting in a swimming pool for 3 days, a bump-out omakase experience, 2 levels, the air conditioning, we have private suites in there, our sponsors have activations in there. It's going to be it's quite a show.
I got to tell you, I announced the original Miami Grand Prix for the track, and then they decided to go a different direction. And at that point, Aaron said, "We'll come and announce in the suite." And every year, when I've gone to the suite for the first time, it's like, this is new and better and better and better. And they have
a large part because you joined us.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. I appreciate that. But I also announced their in-house series, the Concours Cup, and everything that he's talking about for that suite is executed here too. I mean, the team here at the Concours Club is just off the hook. And I come in as I'm just kind of an independent contractor, come in and announce. And I've never felt so much like I found a home. But just watching what his team does, top to bottom, no matter what the event is, art and cars and all of it's just extraordinary what they do. And I've never seen anybody walk out of one of these events going, that wasn't very good. Everybody walks out going, wow, was that incredible.
That's great.
And that's what that's what they're all about here.
The key to that is, as we've discussed before, all the details. And one of those details was having our own announcer, having somebody who understood. There's a track announcer, and there's PAs, and there's echoes, and there's advertisements, and they're back and forth. But we really wanted us, because Greg announces our race series, we have a relationship with him. Our drivers know him. Our guests stop and say hello to him. Greg was also the announcer for Ferrari Challenge, of which we're still a season sponsor. So many of us and so many of our guys compete in that series. We already had a relationship. I was a fan of Greg's long before I ever had the pleasure of meeting him or even calling a race with him, which is something that I absolutely cherish. I think we kind of started our motorsports journeys at a similar time.
Yeah.
And Greg was my favorite announcer. So when I heard that the stadium was going in another direction, I was thrilled. I think I wrote you a text message within minutes of that and said, well, you have a home with us anytime you want one. And
you did.
It really adds to the experience. Having somebody on site who understands the club, who knows our members, who's so knowledgeable. One of the things I love about Greg's announcing, particularly at that event, is he has this ability to address both the hardcore fans with the minute details of qualifying and tire strategy, but he always takes a minute and he steps back and he explains the basics to the social fans. And I get comments every year that, wow, your announcer was great. I really never understood what that was or why somebody would talk about that or what is DRS? What does that mean? And we start throwing these terms around, and I think people who don't know can be embarrassed to ask those kinds of questions. And I think Greg does a great job of announcing both to the hardcore fan as well as the social casual attendee.
You're a long way from from snowmobile announcing in Minnesota, aren't you?
Yeah, I truly am. How I got here from there is just, I just can't believe it. It's been an incredible journey. That said, announcing snowmobile racing and snowcross in particular, where it's basically motocross for snowmobiles, what the really good guys could do there was just breathtaking as well. And any sport you're in, when you get to the pinnacle of it, and watching what they can do is just mind-boggling, that skill set. When I first started doing snowmobile racing, back then they were doing what's called ice le Mans, which was they go out and literally plow a road course, maybe half a mile in length, on a frozen lake, and the snowmobiles would go out with picks in the tracks and carbine runners in the skis and just fly around these ice tracks. And it was the closest thing, and I'm a road racing guy, and it was the closest thing to snowmobiles road racing. And I just fell in love with it, and then things progressed a little bit, and it's just been an absolutely incredible journey to end up calling Formula One.
So technical support level has changed significantly as well.
Significantly.
Yes, it has.
This is true.
Yeah. Your big break, you were telling me off air, came on a phone call when you were assigned to do pit coverage in Vancouver. Or they had asked if you wanted to do pit coverage for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. But we both got our start there, you and I. But you had to say no because you had a contract that you were under contract anyway. Tell me that story again. Tell our listeners that story.
Well, I had Chris McClure, who was a great announcer, and he also did all the track setup, all the PA, everything at the Detroit Grand Prix. Mm-hmm. And I was doing the Trans Am series as their traveling series PA guy. And Chris said, "Can you help me and do the Indy cars? I need another announcer for that." And I said, "I'd love to." And so we started this relationship. And like a couple of years later, Molestar Productions, who
owns the Montreal Canadiens, correct?
Yeah, and they do Hockey Night Canada,
right?
And they're a top level production company, and they did the big screens in PA for the two Molestar Indy races in Toronto and Vancouver, and the CBC was the broadcaster, but they did the actual production. And they needed another PA announcer. One of the guys had to leave, and Chris recommended me. And so I went and did that. And I did that for 3.5 years, essentially. And it was massively good training because they did it like 3 days of live TV for 8 hours. Yeah. So I had a headset, I had a producer in my ear, and when there was a downtime, "Hey, Greg, we're going to roll that Ontario tourism piece. Can you set it up?" So I was getting this great training in TV, even though it was PA. And I'm sitting at home, and it's like 2 weeks before Vancouver, and I get a call from the head of CBC Sports, and he said, "Hey, one of our pit announcers," and I'm cutting to the quick here, "one of our pit announcers can't make the race. Paul Page recommended you. We'd like you to work with us." And I started shaking because this was the break, the moment I've been waiting for to hit. TV was tough to get into, and I'm literally, here it is, and I'm shaking as I said, "I have been waiting for this moment for my entire career, and it kills me that I have to say no." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "I've got a deal with Molestar to do their PA, and I told them that I would, I'm essentially under contract to them, and I got to be able to sleep at night, and they've been really good to me, and I can't just say no at this late notice. That just wouldn't be right." And the guy said, "Well, not a lot of people would do that, but I appreciate that." And I said, I'm so sorry, And literally, I hung the phone up and I started crying. Because I went, that could be it.
Yeah.
Hour later, phone rings, and it's the head of Molestar Productions. And he says, "So I hear you've been talking to CBC about working for them at Vancouver. It's only 2 weeks." And I went, I told him no. I told him I'm contracted to you. And he went, I'm just messing with you, man. Relax." And I went, "What?" And he said, "Here's the deal." He said, "On a good weekend, our coverage reaches 250,000 fans at the track. CBC is national. They are our national broadcaster. We have to support them." Because Molson, obviously sponsored the race. This was Molestar Productions, Molson Productions. He said, "We've got to support our national broadcaster. So I have absolutely no option here but to fire you." And I went, what?
Beautiful.
And he said, and I hope you don't mind, but I called the guys over at CBC and acted as your agent and negotiated a deal for you. And I went, are you kidding me? He said, no. He goes, and here's what they're going to pay. Is that okay? And I went, yeah, that'll do. And inside I'm going, because it was something, I'd never had anything like that. And so I went and did.
Have you heard that story, Aaron?
No, I had not.
Yeah, I went and did the pits. I was a pit reporter for the Indy Vancouver race, and it went well. And for the next 3 years, I did the pits for all of the, both of the Canadian races. And from that, I created a tape that I sent out to TNN, and back then they were big, ESPN, this new thing called Speed Vision.
They're the ones that picked you up. That's where I started.
Speed Vision.
Speed picked you up.
Speed Vision.
And you were doing X Games also, right?
Yeah, well, for snowmobiles, we'd been doing,
Okay.
yes, the snowcross was in the X Games, and so, I mean, that got me certainly some, notoriety and everything, but it was funny, because the ESPN guy sent me my tape back and said, you clearly know your stuff, you're a little rough around the edges, so when you get more experience, and it was Speed Vision that ultimately hired me with Calvin Fish.
Speed Vision was one of those channels that changed my life. It gave me kind of exposure to this type of sport that I really hooked me and got the passion for. And we were lucky enough just at our season finale 2 weeks ago to host Speed Vision founder Roger Warner.
Wow.
He was a guest at our race. I think
Wow.
that was meaningful to both of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. And it changed, for most North Americans, having Formula One on speed as well changed everything.
Formula One, Le Mans,
Right.
Trans Am, the Speed Vision Cup Series. having
It was the first network that was just racing, and it was
and
road racing.
It was the immediacy of
Yeah.
road racing, because it was a history lesson before that.
Yeah.
We would read the magazine and see who won last weekend. You would pick up Auto Week and go right to the competition page, and you know what happened.
And if you were lucky on Wide World of Sports,
You
Yes.
get
You
get
get a
this.
clip.
10-minute little clip
Yeah,
about
yeah.
here's what happened to Monaco.
Exactly,
Right.
but it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So that was Speed Vision was the first immediacy of that relevant content.
And road racing.
Yeah.
And that, and I think that woke people up about that there was a substantial fan base for road racing.
Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah.
No, but it just nobody was really
And
aware
I
of it.
think that Speed Vision Cup, being that it was a touring car based series and had such relevancy to the
Yes.
sports car boom in the
Yes.
marketplace in the 90s there, I think that series really drove a lot of car sales, changed the industry.
I think it did,
The
yeah.
Acura Integra Type R
Right.
was the car of that series, right?
Well, and I think, and on the GT side,
Yeah.
you think about prior to Cadillac getting involved in World Challenge Speed GT,
Yeah.
they were just a luxury brand.
Yep.
That was kind of
That was one of their first real
on the decline.
performance, yeah.
And they created this World Challenge GT monster. And suddenly they became not just a luxury brand that was whatever. Now they were a high performance
Johnny
luxury
O'Brien,
brand.
that thing.
Johnny O'Connell.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was,
That was great.
it was phenomenal.
And that was a great door banging, wheel to wheel, hardcore racing in the US, and American drivers dicing it out with the Brits. It was
Well,
great
one of the cool,
series.
I remember Johnny O'Connell and Olivia Beretta.
Yeah.
When they were running the Corvettes in the American Le Mans series.
Right.
And it was, for a lot of years, it was just those two cars in the GTS class, because Aston Martin would show up, or but never. And Olivia and Johnny drove different cars with their teammates. And they'd get into these door banging battles, and Corvettes at race, just don't wreck everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, then years later, Johnny shows up in Cadillac running in World Challenge. Olivier Beretta shows up in Ferrari, and they both at that point, because they were done with being teammates, made it very clear they didn't really care for each other.
Yeah.
And some
Which
of the
created even more drama.
oh my God, some of the racing in World
Greg and I
Challenge.
are prone to these tangents.
No, I love it.
Be careful discussing motorsport around the two of us.
Yes, but they got into these door banging battles that just literally blew up World Challenge too. I mean, it was an incredible era.
To bring it back to the club,
Yes.
that Acura Integra was one of my favorite cars
Oh, yeah.
watching it. And one of my favorite drivers, I had the poster on the wall, was Pierre Klein,
Oh, of course.
who I'm happy to now say is one of our driver coaches.
Oh, wonderful.
And he's working here multiple days a week. He's one of my core guys.
One of the nicest guys in the
No
planet.
doubt.
Until the visor snaps down.
Great coach.
Then he's a monster. Yeah,
Great
he's a
coach.
phenomenal
Yeah.
coach.
Can you, when you reflect back on your career and moments that you've just walked us through, it's remarkable, isn't it? The places and the things that you've been a part of, and now you're involved with electric powerboat racing.
I am.
That with the do I have it right that the founder of the Formula E series has put his weight against this.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. Alejandro Agag,
Right.
who was the driving force, Formula E, and then off-road, the off-road series that they had for a while. And there's a guy named Rodney Basso, who was a NASA engineer, used to be an engineer for Ferrari F1, and an avid boater, and who literally was getting concerned about the amount, because you look at the average power boat, it's just puking all this stuff into the water.
Right.
And he said, in these really popular areas, the seabed was getting destroyed, and it's not just the pollutants, it's the churn of the props that disrupt stuff, all that. And so he went to Alejandro Agag and said, I have this idea. And so now, last year was the debut at Full World, how UIM, which is the FIA of boat racing, granted them full world championship status, but probably because of what Alejandro was able to do with FE. There's a full world championship, and these boats are just stunning. They're called race birds, and they literally, it's the only boat racing series that goes up on foils.
Cool.
And with an electric outboard. And Danny Close, who announced Formula One with me last year, just got his first win.
Formula One driver.
Yeah, just got his first win at the opening round in Jeddah. And it's a full world championship, and it's so different and it's so new. And to be part of that in its first season and the journey, because all the pilots were learning, everybody's learning, I'm learning, because I'd never called boat racing really before.
But a race is a race.
But a race is a race, and you look at the strategies and you start to see stuff, and it's just been a treat.
They literally fly on the water.
Oh yeah.
They're flying.
Yeah, once they hit throttle, it's an electric engine, so it's instant torque.
Imagine that torque profile suits a marine application.
It does. It does. And they hit the throttle and they're just up on the foils. And then if it's a fairly calm sea, there's very little disruption, and they literally fly on the water, and it's so cool. And the funny thing is the way it's designed, you get one boat, you're allowed to have one person with boating experience. The other person has to have no experience. Like Danny, who's never done powerboat racing, he's one of the drivers, but he's got a boater that's his partner. And the interesting thing, you would think all the boat racers would be, oh, we got this. No, because when you're up on foil, everything they're used to in terms of planing out the boat is backwards.
Oh, wow.
And also, there's a lot of controls on the steering wheel, which they don't have, because they got a steering wheel
But
and
an
a throttle.
ex-Formula One driver.
Ex-Formula One person,
Danny
so
jumps
used
in
to the
there
buttons.
And the mental requirements of understanding and operating that.
Yeah, and keep in mind that, when then for the car racers, they're used to being on a nice, smooth, flat surface, right? So they get yaw, maybe a little pitch, right? Well, now when you're up on the foil and you hit a wave, and these foils are a ways out there. So you hit something, a swell, and the boat goes like this and then like this. So you're getting pitch, yaw, and roll. And then if you're a car racer and you start to feel a big level of roll, you're thinking, I'm going over. And that's not it. So everybody has to completely recalibrate, and you can see the people that just figured it out. That one of the guys is Lucas Ordonez, who started. He was one of the first winners of the Nissan GT.
Oh, sure.
Sim racing thing.
Yep.
He's become one of the stars in this boat racing thing, because he can just at Le Mans, he drove the Delta Wing. LMP2, he could drive anything.
Anything bizarre and unique, right?
Exactly.
He drove that Delta Wing.
Yeah, exactly. And he got into the boat, and he was faster than his partner, who was a former boat racer.
And they go around the world. You were telling me before, they're in Venice. They're all over the place, right?
Yep. This year they opened in Jeddah, and then they went to Bahrain. Next stop is Lake Maggiore and Dubrovnik. It's just, and here's the biggie, the season finale this season, season 2, Miami.
Oh.
So that's going to be really cool.
If you send Jason and my VIP tickets here, I'll make sure he gets his. We can transit it.
I'll certainly see what I can do about that.
You're doing play-by-play for it, right?
I do play-by-play.
What have you had to adjust?
Oddly enough, all of these glorious venues around the world, and I hop on that plane to a studio in London.
Well,
in a room like this, basically.
The way Formula One was broadcast out of a studio in North Carolina, getting the world feed.
Yep, same idea.
Right.
And for this, the venues they have, I've done a couple of FE races, and the setup for that is F1 like in Monaco. The production, it's massive. There's no room for these, these events, like at Venice.
Right.
You're off on this little island. There's no room for a massive production compound.
They're covering a large territory there. And
Correct.
getting a proximity to view that without having that digital assistant's got to be challenging.
Yeah, it is.
It's not
It is.
impossible.
So the only thing on site, we got one remote announcer and cameras. But now with the technology, the digital, they can send every camera feed back to London uninterrupted. So everything, production, director, producer, graphics, audio, everything's being mixed in London. And but it's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
You have a landmark announcement that you've just made here this weekend, and you are now a partner with the iconic British automaker Aston Martin. The Aston Martins are parked outside here already. I know it's a multi-vehicle collaboration, but Aston Martin is now the official car of the Concours Club. Tell me a little bit about that. How did it come to be? What does it mean? And we'll certainly see more DBX 707s around.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't be more proud to announce this and to watch the growth of the club. And every motorsport country club, I think, is always looking for additional ways to entertain its guests and its clients. And we have a full fleet of race cars here. That's terrific. You see them running over our shoulder.
Right.
But we do a lot of corporate entertainment. And corporate entertainment isn't necessarily people who want to learn to race a car or who want to go that far in deep. So, when you look out on the landscape of sports cars, we really wanted to find something that was unique. As you mentioned, we care about every detail. Aesthetics are super important to us, and I don't think anybody would argue that Aston Martin is absolutely on the bleeding edge of design. Every product in their line is absolutely incredible. There's not a bad line on them. So when we look for partners to say, well, how can we create a driving experience, a corporate level driving experience for our guests? It has to be in an elevated platform. It has to be in something super luxurious, but we're still a racetrack, so it has to be something with a performance DNA and an ethos for that. So we went out and looked at brands, and very luckily we had a member of the club who was a terrific customer of Aston Martin and a brand loyalist and owns a lot of the products, and he facilitated some introductions, and that started the conversation. Ironically, the conversation started 1 year ago at Formula One last year. The conversation has evolved from there, and we're so proud that in 1 year we're making that announcement now, and we're going to be hosting Aston Martin guests at our suite, and we'll have Aston Martins on site. We'll have a fleet of Vantages. We have some DBXs. Our services range a broad spectrum, so we'll be using DBXs to do airport pickups and drop-offs and shuttle people around the city, and we'll be using some DBXs to get to and from the stadium today. And if you're a corporation or a group and you want to host an event here, we'll be able to execute those events in these brand new Vantages. I don't know if you've been in one yet, but the growl of the V8 sound and the turbos, and they're just stunning vehicles. So we're really proud to announce that, and we'll see where this takes us in the future.
So that explains, I guess, Alonso's suit for the entry today.
Every detail matters, Greg. I love that guys like you get recognized.
It all comes together, exactly.
And I'll tell you what, was it 3 weeks ago now? The season finale for Round 7, there was a Valkyrie that came out and did the time trials with an unmuffled V12. We'd be calling and all of a sudden we'd just shut up and just
notice the pace car?
Oh, listen to that. No.
Pace car was a Vantage as well?
Yes, it was. That's right. Yeah, it was just amazing.
So driver training, corporate entertainment, VIP transportation, as you say, and you'll tailor everything to the guest experience, and it really kind of synonymous with everything that you're doing here, right, Aaron?
Yeah, that program's going to be super unique. Growing up as a car guy, I think we discussed one of those things I absolutely cherish. When the car driver would arrive, and you go right to the last page, and you look at the data. Every car was the data was there. Well, we didn't have the internet then, so that was your comparison point. And as a kid reading the 0 to 60 and 0 to 60 to 0 and the slalom times, I would always think, who gets to drive these cars? That's the best drive in the world. It's going to be the best job in the world. So I think one of the things we want to do is create something that's similar to that experience, because these are street cars, they're not race cars. So we want to create an experience we're going to put together that you really get to feel what these cars are capable of, understand the performance by experiencing it. We'll also have our new 200-foot concrete irrigated skid pad. And I don't know what's more fun than a wet skid pad and a twin-turbo rear-wheel drive V8. But if you can find something, let me know.
Yeah, so far.
It's time to make the donuts.
Tough to top. Yeah, exactly. And I was just going to say, the thing that really struck me when Neil this club got completed and I was able to come down, is as you drive in, right across the road is the executive airport,
Right.
Ropalaka.
Right.
And what is it? You guys, from the time somebody lands their plane and steps off it to the time they can be in their car lapping, here's what, 15 minutes?
Yeah,
I mean,
in the car lapping, and we'll have
Yeah.
them on site in a minute and a half, and we get them in the car within 10 to 15
It's
minutes.
just incredible, the convenience for extremely busy,
I think we'll be
super
able to
effective
lower that
business.
time now that we have a DBX to get them
Yeah, you ought
across
to be
the
able
street.
to, yeah.
So work on that launch mode.
You've had some teams and some guests here for F1 weekend in the past. I think Mercedes came in last year. You've had the Williams team in before.
Got Alpine.
We've had Alpine. Could we see Mr. Stroll's activity here in the future, possibly?
I would love to see that activity here in the future.
Yeah.
I think that is a team that their results this season certainly don't show what they're capable of, but I think all of us who are F1 fans know if you have a budget and you have Adrian Newey, all you need is time.
That's right.
If
Yeah.
you have time, budget,
Right.
and Adrian Newey, next season's going to be exciting
Right.
for them. I think Alonso and Stroll are both sitting back patiently waiting to have a car under them that's worthy of their driving skill. We'll be right there next year to see it. I can't wait.
Yeah.
It's gonna
Well,
be
Alonso
terrific.
even
So-
made the comment, he said, we just need to get used to this year probably not scoring a lot of points.
Yeah.
Right.
Because because F1 now has a budget cap.
Yeah.
And so that with Adrian coming on board, they're putting everything into that 2026 car. Because there's going to be new engine regs and all
That's
that.
right.
So with Adrian working on it, they can come out of the box with something that could be an instant contender. And
We
that's-
do have them on site today, though. They'll be activating this afternoon. Some of their key sponsors will be here. We'll be starting that corporate entertainment today. So you'll be able to get a chance, if you're one of the partner companies of Aston Martin or ours, you can get a chance to try one of those cars on the course this afternoon.
Wonderful.
Cool.
Final thing for you, Greg. The season, you mentioned 2026, and there's obviously everybody's kind of waiting with bated breath to see what happens next year, right? Interesting that not a lot of people here talking about Max, but talking more about other drivers, and now talking about Cadillac even, and Audi, and all these new entries. With the state of the sport right now?
I think it's really stronger than ever. And obviously having Audi come in with a serious program, and then having Cadillac, adding a new program, which they haven't allowed for a few years, that's really exciting. I think it's going strength to strength. And the interesting thing to me is, even this year, you look at the qualifying grids, you got 20 cars that are covered by maybe a second.
Yeah.
I mean, and the margins oftentimes in qualifying, you're talking thousands.
Yeah.
So the issue with the quote-unquote back markers, right, is on one lap they can be just almost as fast as anybody. It's just making it work over the distance.
Yeah.
But you look at what happened when the current regs came out, where they went to the tunnels and tried to get rid of some of the aero above the car, and suddenly Mercedes, which had just been dominant for years, they were struggling to even make the top 5. So whenever you get a big change in the regulations, it can really upset things. And then you throw in a Newey who's left, and now, and you look at Max's car when Newey was, the creator, who was untouchable, and he is the guru. So I think it's, one, it's got this element of everybody's super close, but next year it's going to be better.
Right.
And it's going to be flipped on its head a little bit, or it has that, that potential. And then, let's not forget the drawing power of a Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
And now with wearing red.
Right.
With Ferrari.
Right.
That's a big thing that people are going to be really, he won the sprint in Bahrain.
That's right.
Which is, his first win in a Ferrari wasn't an actual GP.
It paid points.
It paid points, and it let everybody know that Lewis, he's not in decline like some people may have been thinking, and he's just got to get to adapt. So there's so much great storylines, and then the new regs, it's just going to be amazing, I think.
That's 25 and 26 with F1, 25 and 26 at the club. Big things coming?
Always big things coming. Our event center just opened this year. It's going to go into full swing. We've got some new strategies working on that. We'll be announcing some new partnerships around that and executing some super unique events. We've really put a flag in the sand with some of our signature events, so we're pushing to make those better and better and better. And the more momentum those get, the easier it is to draw unique cars, because now it has a reputation. So I think those are going to continue to get better and better, and more construction underway. We have multiple projects that we're going to break ground on shortly, and we're not done building yet. So the club is still growing. We still have, while the rate is slowed, we still have a little bit more space. We're still acquiring some new members on referral from existing members. Everything is on the incline, and we're happy to be along for the ride.
And I saw that Andre Agassi has come out of retirement and is now a pro pickleball player. Aren't you going to build some courts?
Thank you for reminding me. We did, and we did our
Pickleball and paddle
launch.
courts, that's
we
right.
built 2 pickleball and 2 paddleball courts, and we did our launch tournament last night. And 2 of our members, Nico and Luca Falero, were our initial champions of the first opening tournament. Congratulations to those guys.
Congratulations to you on everything that you're doing here this weekend. And Greg, pleasure to have you on the program as well.
Likewise, thanks for the invite.
Thanks for coming back.
Jason, when we wrap up our broadcast, Greg and I have a little tradition where we discuss where we're headed to the buffet. So maybe we can carry that over and invite you to come over to the stadium and join us at the Omakase.
Absolutely. Right behind the Alonso suit.
You bet.
After being transported in an Aston Martin.
We look forward
Thank
to
you
it.
so much. I appreciate you being on the program.
That was my pleasure.
Thank you, Greg.
It was a treat.
Thank you.